Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back. This week we're doing the Serpent and the Seax knife part 2. We're going to finish it up and see how that goes. You saw me put the Serpent in the steel, or in the iron rather. We used wrought iron and Damascus for the Serpent. You saw how I did that. The reason I did it the way I did it is because a couple of years ago I saw a video by, I believe it was Niles Provost, I think the gentleman's name is, on YouTube, and he had done a Serpent and the Sword, and he used a bandsaw to cut notches in the side of mild steel bars that he had forge welded to the sides of his Damascus to make the Serpent. And I wanted to discover or try to figure out how that could be done without using the bandsaw, just nothing but forging. And I think I accomplished that pretty well. I didn't plan it out too well. It was kind of done on the fly, so it didn't come out a perfect Serpent, but it came out pretty close. So that kind of proves the concept for me. So moving forward, you know, we have Damascus on the spine. It's kind of something I'm stuck on. I like that look, and I wanted to do that. And because I had some left over from the Serpent. And the wrought iron cutting edge of this thing, this dates back to like the early Iron Age is what I want to do with this thing. And I don't know how it's going to come out. This is something I wanted to do for a long time, and it's another discovery process. But I want to work harden the edge of that wrought iron, and basically the way you do that is cold forging. You forge below a dull red heat into a black heat basically, and you try not to delaminate the wrought iron. So what ends up happening is you have a thickness of material, say 1/8 inch thick, and you want to work harden it. You have to compress it 50% or more from what I'm reading and what I'm understanding. And we're going to give that a shot. We're going to see how that works out. This thing may end up being a knife-shaped object that just doesn't cut anything. But like I said, it's an exercise in discovery, and it's going to be more of an art piece than anything. It's going to hang on my wall and not go anywhere. So like I said, my expectations aren't super high with this, but the discovery for me is more important than any of that. So we're going to see how that goes. Enough of me rambling on about this thing, so let's get to it. Stick with me, guys. Should be fun. Thanks. Bye. Okay, guys. We're doing a little drawing on this thing from some archaeological articles that I found online, so I can be somewhat accurate and give me something, a map to follow to make sure I get this thing somewhere in the ballpark. So we're going to get this thing into the forge, and we're going to start off on the small anvil. It's got a little more crisp edges to isolate the tang with. We're going to draw out the tang first. Once we isolate these, we're going to go right to the power hammer. Now, the reason that I'm using the power hammer on this and other tools is I'm kind of limited on time. I get a few hours a week to work on this, and if I were to do this by hand, I wouldn't be able to finish it for probably a few weeks. And we've got more projects we want to move on to, so that's why we're using Scrappy the Viking Power Hammer Striker to help me out with this. Okay, so we're drawing this tang down. You can see me using my little blacksmith calipers there. Dividing tools, people call them all sorts of things. And just trying to stick as close as I can to the drawing I made, but there are some variances in there, and it does change a little bit, but just my lack of experience with blades. Alright, it's looking pretty good there. Okay, we're onto the big anvil here. We're just going to refine the shape of that tang a little bit. Not too much, but the more we can refine and the closer we can get it to a forged finish, the less we have to worry about grinding and things like that. So we're on the mild steel anvil here. It's big enough and it's got a good hold down on it. So I'm marking out the diagonal, which will be sort of the clip point on the front of this knife. And the reason I'm chiseling it out rather than hammering it in is because I don't want to distort the Serpent any more than I have to. And we are going to do some refinement and curve the blade a little bit, but that should be minimized. So over to the vise to file off the rag from the chisel mark and see if we delaminated any of the forge welds, and we did. So normally you would have to go back into the forge, reforge weld it, but I chiseled this thing off about 3/4 of an inch longer than I needed to match my drawing. I simply cut it back with a grinder to save the time. So when we're done, we should match our drawing pretty well. So we're on the big anvil, and I'm starting to hammer in the bevels on this thing. And I wanted to take them down to about 1/8 of an inch, and then cold forge them the rest of the way down to around a 1/16 or a little less. And I did that, and after I got done doing that, I realized, well, I didn't turn the camera on. Oh well, we move forward. All right. Once we get this thing hammered out and into the closest shape we can get it to what we need, we're going to get it over into the vise, and we're going to take a hard stone grinder to it. Now the Serpent scaled up more than the rod, so it was sort of impressed a little bit. So there was quite a bit of grinding to do here. That's why I left the spine and the rest of the knife so thick after forging, is because I realized that by the time I had hammered all that out, it would have further distorted my Serpent. So when I got done with this point, I realized that my clip point wasn't back far enough on the blade. So on the belt grinder, I corrected that. So since it's kind of an experimental knife anyway, I decided that I was going to do the beveling by hand and see if I could improve my skills there a little bit. Still not that great, but you know. All right, we got her cleaned up. The initial bevels on there. We're going to give this thing a little etch and see how she comes out. See what our Serpent looks like after all that hammering and grinding and all that. So, yeah, it's definitely got some contrast. You can see there. That's a spine, and this is what our Serpent looks like. Not too bad. This side's a little more distorted, but you can see a little of my Serpent peeking through the other side. We went past that central weld a little. No big deal. All right, this guy is a bolster, and we're going to do this now because I don't want to mess up the knife anymore later. I have to go back and try to fix it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sand cast a brass, I guess it's called a bolster. I'm guessing at that. I don't know. You guys can let me know. Around the back of this. So there's our brass in our little homemade crucible. I threw a little borax on top of it to flux it a little bit. Seems to help it melt a little quicker. And this is the same crucible I used to pour the bearings for the power hammer. Anyway, you can see the initial pour goes pretty well, but as it gets up to the top, it starts bubbling a little bit. So this thing's going to have some porosity in it. So it's not going to be the full bolster, but I'm going to see if I can salvage something out of it. We get this thing out of here and take a look. Now the plan is to take it over to the vise and put it between the jaws and drive the blade out of it so I can work on it. And you can see the bubbles in it there. But it's not too bad. I should be able to salvage the center piece and it'll be prepped for the tank. Alright, this is what I was able to salvage. I think we're going to grind this down into about a 1/4 inch thick piece and use it. Alright guys, so a little intermission here. Anyway, little explanation as to what's going to happen next, and I felt it necessary to do that. So anyway, was online, going through blade forums, talking to people, stuff like that. It was like Reddit, Facebook, and bladeforums.com or something. I don't know. So many of them, they're all a blur now. But anyway, I was talking to a couple of guys, and they were talking about wrought iron and Damascus and welding them together and all that kind of stuff. And I told them, I'd work hardened it, that kind of thing. And they're all about, well, you should quench it. And I'm, isn't that going to remove the work hardening? Oh, you'd be surprised. Some wrought iron has carbon levels in it, blah, blah, blah. It may end up better. And I'm like, I don't think so. And one guy's like, well, yeah, but you'll find out if there's any bad welds because it'll split. Because the wrought iron cools at a different rate than the carbon steel and blah, blah, blah. And that was enough. I decided that whether it removes the work hardening or not, I'm going to quench it to find out what happens. Bit of advice, never listen to people online. Let's get back to the show. Thanks, guys.
Now you may recognize the guy doing this, bringing this blade up to critical temperature, Mr. Gullible. And he's in and out, making sure that it's up to temp, testing it with a magnet, getting it ready to go into the oil to find out what this thing's going to do. So let's get it in the oil. And it comes out and it looks like this. Oh no. Perfectly straight, no cracks. Test it with a file, and it actually skates off mostly. So as I'm cleaning the guck off this thing and putting the final bevels on it before polishing, so we can give it its final etch, guys online aren't always wrong. But we really don't know much about our work hardening because I'm sure that was lost. I don't know really. We'll try it again sometime. Alright, so we get it over on the board, and we started off with stones. We used a coarse stone, went to a fine stone, and then eventually we went to I think it was a 600 grit paper that I had wrapped around a stick to polish it out. I gotta tell you, you guys that do this all the time, a lot of patience. I was chasing little scratches for, oh god, it seemed like a couple of hours. Alright, it's all polished up. We're going to get it into its final etch, and this will show us what our finished knife is going to look like before we put a handle on it. It's still got a good contrast. You can see that serpent in there a little bit better. Alright, so here she is. Not too bad, not too bad. You can really see the lines in that wrought iron. That serpent doesn't look too bad. I really like that back, that spine on that thing. Alright, so here's our handle process, the finished part of that. So we're going to pull this out of the juice, the cactus juice, and wipe it off a little bit. And we're going to wrap it in aluminum foil and get it ready to go into our oven. We drain it there a little. You're going to see me pulling it out of a jar a second time. You know, we had a little spill and had to kind of start over there. Lost a little juice. We get it wrapped up in the aluminum foil and put it on this tray to go in the oven. The aluminum foil doesn't do anything more than keep the juice from going all over your little toaster oven. Alright, so we're pouring the rest of the juice back in the jug. And yes, this stuff can be reused over and over. And the only thing you lose is what it soaks up or what you spill. So, alright, into the toaster oven, 250 degrees. Left it in there for about 3.5 hours. And this aluminum foil is really thin and it's difficult to get off here. It took me forever, but and juice stuck to it and everything. Typically it's a lot easier, it just peels off, but we got it off there, took it to the bandsaw and trimmed the sides down. Cut one end off, and I took it to the polisher and I just hit it with a buffer wheel to see what it would do. This stuff is hard, it's like plastic, it's really nice to work with, very machinable. So there you go. Okay, we're back to our little plate, and we ground it down from that big chunk we had. We're a little wonky still. And because it was from the center, we ended up filing it out because it came from an upper part of the tang, and it has a taper, so it probably could have built one, but I don't know. It was fun anyway. We'll try it again. See if we can get it to work next time. Alright, so here it is on the blade, and I ended up filing a couple of little shoulders there to keep it a little tighter there. My lack of experience in blade making to know any better, so that's what I did. So this bone is going to be the first part of the handle, and I'm going to trim off this excess brass so that I can save a little time on the grinder. So I'm going to glue this bone right to that piece of brass. And we're going to clamp that thing up to the bolster. I think it's a bolster. You guys can let me know, you smart knife guys. I'm going to keep doing this. I should probably learn all this terminology. Anyway, so we're just going to get these clamps nice and tight and let this thing dry right there while we get the rest of the handle pieces put together. So on top of that bone, we're going to put a little thin brass plate. I'm going to put a hole in that so it'll fit over the tang and sit on top of it. There we go. And we're going to grab our chunk of wood and do the same thing. Now, I didn't show all the drilling of the wood and all that stuff. You guys have probably seen that a million times. And didn't want to make this too long. Now, this bronze plate is going to sit right on top. What we're going to do is drill a hole in the bronze plate, and we're going to grind the end of that tang into a rivet shape. And I'm just making sure that it's good and soft here, because we did quench this thing and it's got some of that Damascus in it, so I don't know really how it'll react. Alright, so we're going to get this thing all glued up. This 5-minute epoxy is awesome stuff. Alright, you can see a little pile of sawdust back there. I'm going to pack this bone full of sawdust to keep it sort of centered on that tang. And then we're going to put some epoxy on top of it. It'll soak down in there and should harden it up a little bit and make it a little more stable. Keep it a little more rigid around that tang so that bone doesn't ever jar loose. Alright, glue up our little plate on top of that. And a lot of epoxy down in that hole and all over the place. So you guys can tell me, when blades were made in the old days before epoxy, was it just all mechanical fit? No, seems logical. Alright, so we're going to peen this thing down. And it took a while, but it did peen down. And I got several marks in my bronze plate. I never did clean them up. Kind of thought they looked cool, so I just polished it up with them in there, but I may clean them up someday, I don't know. So I, in the interest of making a big mess, I grabbed the little 4-inch grinder and removed most of the material on this thing before I went to the belt sander. It just was a lot quicker. I don't want to wear out belts just getting rid of all this wood. It was a large chunk of wood. I could have started with something smaller, but it gave me a lot to work with. You can see a handle sort of forming there. So there was a whole bunch of this, and we went several belts down after the initial shaping of this thing to smooth it out as best we could. And we ended up with, I think this is like a worn out 600 grit belt to kind of polish up that bone and the brass and all that stuff. And it kind of looks like a handle. It's got some little gaps around the tang down at the bottom of the bolster by the plate, but anyway. Over to the buffer and polish everything up. The good thing about this stabilized wood is once you've sanded it down to a fine sandpaper, it just polishes. There's no need for anything but that. It makes a real nice finish. So there it is. You can see the Serpent. Not too bad, not too bad. And I did sharpen it up. You can see some of those lines from the wrought iron in the edge, but it's probably the nicest looking handle I've ever put on anything. Alright, let's put this thing through a little test. Okay guys, so here's the knife, wooden mallet, and this is a piece of rosewood. Pretty tough stuff. Anyway, we're going to split some of this off using different parts of the blade, and we're going to see if we can break this thing. And I just sharpened it up on the belt sander using about an 800 grit belt, and then I stropped it on my pant leg. Now we'll see if we can dull it up by cutting through a little bit of leather after we did the piece of wood there. Nothing's broken so far. Cut the leather, that's pretty thick stuff. That cut pretty easily. Paper. There we go, there's the paper. Let's see if it'll cut through a piece of paper after that. Not on the side, you dummy. On the top. There we go. Yeah, a little chunky, but it managed to cut.
Hey guys, well, there you go. Another one down. I like the way it turned out. It looks pretty good. It performed a lot better than I thought it would. I don't know if that's a result of the work hardening. I don't know if that's a result of the quenching. And I don't know if it's a combination of the two. The work hardening thing is something I'm going to have to do again just to test it. But this is kind of what all this is about for me. It's all about discovery and figuring out what the iron and the steel will do and that kind of thing. So why these blades have been kind of fun for me. It's a new area for me, a far cry from the ornamental and architectural stuff I've always done. So it's good. And I appreciate all the input that I've got from all the folks and all the interaction. It's been a lot of fun. That's really cool. Really appreciate all you folks. There was a couple of things about the blade that kind of worried me a little bit. So if you, let's see if I can get this in the shot here, right along the back, there's an area right there where the carbon steel in the pattern weld up top wrapped around the corner, and when I etched it, that higher carbon steel went away, and I thought it was a crack down through the back, but it wasn't, and it didn't change with, you know, beating on it with the mallet to get through the wood, that kind of stuff. But I really like that handle. I've not built anything like that before. It worked out really well. Thanks to Big Dog for donating the bone. That's awesome. And I think you can see that Serpent in there. So that's a lot of fun. That's going to hang on my wall. So anyway, guys, we're going to call it good. We got another project coming up next weekend. It's going to be pretty intense. Probably won't post it until maybe Sunday night, something like that. There's quite a bit of work to do there, but it's going to be fun. So again, thanks. Like, share, and subscribe. Really appreciate everybody that's been hanging out and checking out the videos. So thanks. We're going to call it good, guys. Take care of yourselves. Have fun. Be safe. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.